Latina Leadership Podcast, the podcast made for Latinas by Latinas. Get comfortable, amiga, and enjoy the conversations.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Latina Leadership Podcast. My name is Anjelica and I am your host. On today's episode, I have an amazing person, Melissa. I like to give the guest an opportunity to introduce yourself. Before I start going down the questions, the information I have, I want you to personally introduce yourself to our audience.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Again, really honored to be here. Melissa, I think this is a topic that's really important too, is like the way you say your name. But I'd say most of my life, I've been Melissa Toledo, but in the Latina world or Spanish world, I am Melissa Toledo and actually go by Melly. So that's my name introduction. Born and raised out of Wisconsin, went to university in Miami, Florida, lived in Atlanta for a while. It's where I got into tech. And then now I'm back in Wisconsin. So I'm actually in my basement in Wisconsin. My father's a Mexican immigrant. So all of my life, I've considered myself like 50-50. And then I saw, I think it was Becky G's interview. She's like, I'm 100% of both. I'm like, that's so true. I'm not 50-50. I'm 100% American and 100% Mexican. And yeah, I've been in tech sales for the last a little over 8 years of my life. I have two sons, so one who's 3.5 and one who just turned 6 months. So I'm 6 months postpartum, which that also is craziness. And I recently was laid off, which I think was such a shocking yet empowering event in my life. And I think that's a lot. That's a brief intro of me. As brief as I can make it.
I have a few questions. So one, Wisconsin. How did your family end up in Wisconsin?
Yeah, so a lot of people always ask that. And so I think, and it's interesting, if you think back like to the amnesty, I think of 86 it was. So first, a lot of Latinos made their way to Chicago. And, you know, once you have a tío or a grandpa or somebody there, it's like, okay, that's where all of the family goes to, right? Because that's where they can find you jobs. So at that time, my father, who was, I think, 15 or 16, he came to a small town near Chicago. And that's where already my one uncle was and a few of my cousins. I'm trying to think like lineage, what they were really considered, but I call everybody tío. And they already had a job. So then they're like, hey, come here and you could be a busboy. And so he became a busboy in a restaurant near Chicago where my mom then became the manager. And he asked for a ride home one day and the rest is history. That's how my mom and my dad met in Northern Illinois and then came up to Wisconsin, I guess.
I have family in Wisconsin, and some of them were born there, and it's just so relatively different from like the areas they come from in Mexico, right? Some of them are from tropical areas, some of them are, and then to be there, and I heard the winters are rigid. I heard the winters are not to be dealt with in a way that's very. So every time I hear Wisconsin, and I heard, in my understanding, there's a huge Latino community up there in Wisconsin, up towards like maybe 2 hours past Chicago, like up towards Wisconsin, like in that area. I heard the Latino community it's quite big, and which is interesting. I think we make a very much community-oriented space for ourselves wherever we go. We make sure we have the carnicerias, the tortillerias. We make sure we have make sure the Catholic churches give us mass in Spanish. Make sure that we are integrated ourselves in a lot of what the space offers us. Pero enough about Wisconsin. Enough about the Middle East. The Middle West. I'm sorry. Let's talk about you, Melissa. So, with a few questions, how did you get started in the tech world? Now, I've seen that you worked for a lot of tech industries like the Salesforce, and I don't understand what the cloud even is. I don't know what the mechanisms are behind any of that. But my question refrains from not understanding, but how did you get started there, and why did you do it? Was it something along the lines of, were you pulled into it, or was it intentional for you to do it?
Yeah, definitely. I think more fell into it. It would be like the right way to think about it. So right out of college, I worked for Pro Mexico, which is the arm of the Mexican government in the US that focuses on trade and investment. So just trying to get more US companies to manufacture in Mexico, more Mexican manufacturers to sell in the US. So really just it's business and sales in theory, but the titles and working for the Mexican government was different. And then I really was just over Miami. I, loved it from like a college and party social life aspect, but then afterwards it's like, well, I don't know if this is me for me. So I ended up in Atlanta and I didn't know what to do because I went right after college. I worked for the Mexican government. So I never had, thankfully, this is like as something to be grateful for, but I never had to figure out what I wanted to do like for work. And no one prepares you for that. So I just had that job and then I didn't have it because I couldn't do it remote. And I just waitressed. I found a job in Atlanta, in the new town that I moved to in Atlanta, and I just started waitressing. And then someone had reached out and said, "Hey, would you want to be an administrative assistant to the VP of sales at then the company was called Calidus Cloud?" I was like, "Sure, like I can type things and send emails, and like I can do all that kind of stuff, right?" So I joined, and that's immediately when I realized, like, oh, like technology and what does it do, and on premise versus cloud. And so I learned a lot, and I was around like true sales mentality, and I was like, I think I could do this. Like, it's a lot of building relationships, which was really great at, and that's why I think I loved waitressing. You get rewarded for like the stronger relationships you can make in selling things, and so I just saw a lot of skills that I had from other experiences in my life that I could apply. And so after a year of being the admin assistant and doing other things, I realized like, I want to try getting into sales. So then I asked to be an account manager, which is more just taking care of current clients. And I was like, I can do that, like to make sure people are happy. Um, and then that kind of just broadened my view to be like, oh, there's more out there that I could go for. Now, the company that I was at, I was in an office, it was just myself and three other white men who were probably in their older 30s to late 40s. And I, at the time, was like 24. And I was like, I kind of want something more diverse and something bigger. And that's when I decided to go to Salesforce and found an opportunity to be there. And then since then, it's just been consistent learning, throwing myself, at it and really trying to soak up knowledge, not just from what the company offers, but from people. Like that's something I really pride myself on is growing my network through true relationship building and listening and just learning.
So now that you've learned a lot of what you can learn within that industry, what was it? What was it? What moment was it that you decided, okay, this is it. I either need to go out on my own, need to do what I need to do, or I need to figure something else out. Because a lot of us end up doing that, right? Like, am I going to change the workplace, or am I going to change myself, or am I going to change into something else? What was it?
So after 2 years at Salesforce, I also had this feeling of, like I'm potentially selling things to people who don't necessarily need them. And like, no shade to anyone. I think that just comes up and that's natural in some sales tech companies, depending on the industry they're focusing on. And I was referred to someone else at the company Twilio, and they contacted me, and I think right then realized like, oh, if I would have seen this job posting just myself, I would never have applied because I would be like, oh, I don't fit 25 to 50% of this criteria. However, the manager's reaching out to me saying, do I want to apply? 'Cause I can't even tell you right now what API stands for, but I sold APIs for like a year, or no, probably like 2 to 3 years. But I think once I was at Twilio and started being able to be more of a sales professional, but also being able to be involved with the Latinx ERG. So for Salesforce, I started the Latino Force chapter out of Atlanta. But once at Twilio, when I could like do things that not only were important for my profession, but also for who I was as a person, my values and my morals, I was like, oh, like there's a lot of, I guess, freedom to a degree of being in the corporate tech world, and then to a degree sales. I mean, I think the perception of like sales being super stressful is very true. I'm not going to undermine that at all. But being at a Twilio where I could be a part of the Latinx ERG, when the ICE raids were happening, and I asked my CEO if I could present on them and why they aren't like just and fair, and like him being supportive of it. So I think for me, I realized I could become a better, hopefully, version of myself if I stayed in corporate America and then did that from like a moral standpoint, be involved in ERGs. Um, I'd say after having my first son and COVID hitting, I recognized that there was a shift just in who I was as well as who the company was, and quickly realized, especially through therapy, which I'm a very big advocate of therapy, is that I I want to have it all. Like I want to have my cake and eat it too. And I think that's not all realistic, but we're a little bit told that it is, and that that's what we should aim for. And in doing that, like we bring all the stress and pressure onto ourselves. So I've recently, kind of to your question, have been thinking like, okay, what do I want to be again? And like, what do I want to define myself as? And I'm realizing my job doesn't define me. Like I define myself. And then wherever I go, like I will be able to be the best version of myself in that location, in that job, wherever it may be.
So then talk to me a little bit actually about your consulting, because you do consulting now.
Yeah. So I got laid off in December. So 4 months postpartum, like putting baby down to nap. And I come out and I have 2 WhatsApp messages from from 2 ladies that I worked with. And they're like, hey, have you seen your email? And one in Spanish, one in English. I was like, no, like I'm on mat leave. Like I'll check it. So I checked it, and there was the email like, oh, another round of layoffs, which if anyone else in the tech world right now like has experienced a layoff, it's crazy. But it was the third one at my company at Twilio. So I didn't think anything of it. And then I reread the email and I said, the segment organization, like that's the part of the company that I'm in. And I checked again, and there it was, the email that's like, your role's been eliminated due to whatever, like, thank you for your time. And I'm like, oh, dang, this is crazy. It's like being broken up with, completely blindsided. Which I know is probably not like a healthy comparison, but that's how I felt. I felt like just thrown away. I felt not wanted. I felt like I wasn't good enough professional. Like there's so many thoughts. And I was only 4 months postpartum, which still for me, like I know everyone's different after they have a child, but for me, like it's a struggle. And so it was really hard. And then it was like 2 sides came out of it. Like I was really jaded, really upset, like really like, oh, how could they do this? But then the other side of me was like, you have to take this as a blessing in disguise. This is nothing against you as a person or an individual. Like this truly was a layoff. And if you have to think of it that way, or else you're going to mentally like not be okay for a while. And in thinking that, I thought to myself, and a little bit from the Jada side, I'm like, why just not do something for myself? Like, why can't I be my own boss? Why can't I decide who I give my knowledge to next, but not from like an employment standpoint, more from like a consulting standpoint. And at first I was like, this is too much work. Like I can't do it. And then there's a lot of things out on the internet. So I just Googled like, okay, who can give me some advice on getting started? I found someone, and he's just been a coach since, but I registered an LLC, Constante Consulting, which that coming up with the name alone like took me a while, because I like things to have meaning. And so the name itself like had to be really special. The logo, which again, really meaningful to me. It's a bougainvillea. So if you look at it, and like that we had a really big bougainvillea bush at my grandparents' house in Mexico. And my grandfather's name was Constantino, and that's a little bit where the Constante comes from. And so I did everything, and then I built my own website, and like I did all these things, and I was like, okay, I can do it. Now, I right now have one project that I'm working on, but like I haven't found like, oh, 10 people knocking on my door that want it, but I haven't put the effort necessary into it that I would like, because I'm still in the stage of figuring out like, what do I want and what can I realistically do? Like, is it really like 10 projects dedicating X amount of hours a week, knowing that, I have to log off to go pick up my kids at 3 and probably not be back on until 7? Or do I need right now like stability? A paycheck I know is going to come in for the same amount every 2 weeks with healthcare while I build up my consulting. And I think it's an interesting situation to be in. First of all, really lucky to be in the situation, even have the ability to take the time to think about it. But it's an interesting one because I think it's taught me a lot about what we are taught is like, you need to always have stability. You need to always feel safe. I think as an immigrant's daughter as well, like he always was working and he's like, because you never know what's going to happen. So I have that mindset of, well, I have to find what's next and I have to find a job that's stable because you never know what's going to happen. But really, I also remind myself, my dad worked really hard and my mom to put me in a situation where I don't have to be desperate and like just find the next best thing just to have something. So, a lot of therapy and professional coaching work going on week over week.
Yeah. Now I love to hear it. I love to hear the journey. I love to hear I like to hear it's all in the details. So I want to hear it all. I want to hear why, when, where, and what. What was the shift when you had your children that you said, oh, okay, like there's something not here that I'm missing, or something that I'm not missing that it's not here? Was it an identity that you wanted to show your children, or was it, what was it? If you don't mind me asking, I'm nosy as hell, man. I'm sorry.
Oh no, Chismosas. I have something that says Chismosas on it and I have it. And I think it's just like A, part of our culture, but B, again, it's the best way we can all empower each other, is just share our stories and then hopefully like it sparks something in someone else. So yeah, I'm here for it. So my first son, who it's Manuel, named him after my father. First of all, I was not empowered preparing for that maternity leave. One other person in our company had ever gone on leave, but her like quota and compensation was very different than mine. So no one knew how to handle my mat leave. I had a manager who didn't have kids, which that is a game changer. Is like if you have children and that's important to you, you probably want that in your manager as well, because they will most likely be more understanding. So he didn't know. And I was the most tenure and achieving rep on the team. So I also type A personality, want to be in control, which is I've learned to let go of a little bit. You have no choice once you have kids. But like I was working until 4 a.m. when I was in labor. I didn't know I was in labor. Working, trying to hand off calls that I had that day and the next day to other people, because I just sensed that something was not wrong, but something was like coming. And then gave birth, like pushed out, vaginal birth, no meds to my son. He had to unfortunately get taken to the NICU for some breathing. Right away, back on my phone slacking, because I didn't prepare and no one helped me prepare, and no one told me, get off your phone. And I was literally in my hospital bed that I just delivered in, slacking to be like, hey, take this customer call for me. Hey, do this. And that's terrible. And like, I'm not saying that like, as like, oh, rah me, like that's so bad. As I'm like, that's terrible. And we need to empower women to not do that. And so I think looking back, if I wish I could have told myself to like, put you first, put your family that's coming first. Like this is a once in a lifetime experience. So it's definitely something I try to like empower others to do. And then upon returning, which I came back to work early because I was not in a good mental state. And I just was like, I'm not a good mom. I don't know how to be a mom. Like, how do I know he's like happy with me? I have no idea what I'm doing. But you know what I do know? Work. Like, I know how to work. People at work recognize me. People at work say thank you to me when this small human creature doesn't, which again, not a healthy way of thinking. But that's, again, no one had empowered me. I never knew anyone else who was in my situation. So I went back to work early. And I remember I had a call with my Better Up coach, which is like a coaching platform that some corporate companies provide to their employees. And I had my first call with Marta, and I just remember I was crying, and she's like, "Why are you working?" I'm like, "I don't know." I'm like, "I don't know anything." And she's like, "Okay, well, maybe you shouldn't come back to work early." And I'm like, "Well, there's already all this work that my boss wants me to do. Like, I don't know what to do." And so I think that is kind of why when I recognize, like, oh, like having a kid, it changes. I wouldn't say, I mean, it does change you as a person, but I won't say change is the right word. Like, it makes you grow, whether you're ready to or not. And it really brings to light, like, the lack of boundaries, the lack of conversations that are had about the topic. And I realized right there and then, like, I wanted to become someone who empowered other women and wanted women in the workspace, or just people in general, even men who wanted to have a child and go out on leave. Like, all right, I'm going to tell you the do's and the don'ts from my point of view. So hopefully you don't make the same mistakes. And now with my second kid, I left work a week early, took full maternity leave, was like, I'm not coming back until the exact day that I have to. What are my benefits while I'm gone? And I think I've become way better at recognizing family first, even when it comes to your job. And people who really see the value in you from a work perspective will understand that and admire that, and not like, what's it called? Like, not discipline you, not discipline. There's a word, probably I'm just not thinking of it. But so yeah, having a kid definitely changed my mentality. I'm still super career driven, but now I feel like I'm figuring out the best way to balance it, of also being like the best mom that I can and want to be.
I like. Well, I don't like that. I didn't like that for you at all. It's no, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. It's responding to emails as soon as you give birth, just so things can go smoothly. After. So the thing is difficult to. It's difficult to get out of your head that this is a whole new life that I need to take care of. I need to make sure he's okay. And so I probably should continue making money. What's the best way to do it? Oh, I have to sit here. And it's a struggle. And I don't want to ever I don't ever want it to go away from men, hey, this is what women go through. But in reality, this is what women go through. Go through. We have to think of ourselves, think of the child, think of, the household, think of all the things that are integrated within what needs to be done. Not that I don't think men understand it, and maybe they understand it in a different way. But when you're tired after giving birth, it's so difficult. Sometimes I feel like you don't know when reality is reality, and when you're making up a scenario, you're trying to fix a scenario that isn't even happening, and you're like, I'm gonna fix it. You're like, what are you fixing? I don't know, something that might happen. What does it matter? I'm fixing it. And that's the way we sustain ourselves. Pero motherhood definitely changes many, many women. Now, let's touch a little bit about, I want to talk about what is it that a Latina, say like my age, right? I'm not even going to say my age. I'm nearing my late 30s and early 40s. Okay. And I'm at my second gasp, at my second come up for air, and I want to do something else. Tech seems interesting. Or maybe I'm a young Latina who never seen as tech, and I'm in college and I'm getting out of college, and I say, you know what, I want a career in tech. Where can I start? Where do I start?
So I would feel more confident giving advice from a sales perspective. And I would say, depending on where you go, sales can be very rewarding and not only financially, but also spiritually. But there's also places that will burn your soul. So it's hard to know until you're there.
I'll go there.
From a sales perspective, if you want to get started, I think, first of all, like, go for it. Do not let a job description like completely turn you off. Because I know there's statistics out there, and I'm gonna totally butcher them, so I won't say the numbers. But there's studies done that show like men will apply whether they meet the criteria or not, and I don't know percentage of women like will say absolutely not. And so I think that's one thing. Like, don't let the job description completely scare you. Like, look at it and take really into consideration things you've done in college, in high school, side jobs, like whatever it may be, and make those experiences and skills work for you in a tech or corporate setting. For sales in particular, I think the option of being like either a chief of staff or an admin is a good place to start. Now, I think there's also a good balance between figuring out what the bare minimum you need from a financial standpoint to be stable. Like, okay, what's the bare minimum I need to make? And make sure you use that. Like, don't completely throw that out the window just to get into tech. I don't know if that's necessarily like worth it, but again, everyone's different. But an admin role, a chief of staff is really good and can give you really good insight as well. It's similar to an admin role, but just to a higher title. Sales specifically, you can also look at like business development. So either SDR, so I'm trying to think, there's like SDR, BDR, inside sales. Well, there's titles, all kinds of titles. But I think those are really good too. And I think those are vital. So I was an account manager at Calidus, which was bought by SAP, and then took a quote unquote step back to be a business development representative. But that taught me so much. It's like you're forced to get out of your comfort zone. You have to be calling people, emailing people, cold outreach, like all of these things that I would never have learned if I would have just skipped that step. So I think starting as a business development rep or a sales development representative is really important because it gives you firsthand experience. And then just getting your foot in the door is like the first major win. And then from there, just advocating for yourself, like aprovechando everything that company gives you from an enablement and benefit standpoint, and then keeping record of every little thing you do beyond your job title. I think I call it a brag bank. I don't know, like I think everyone calls it different, but it's literally just a Google Doc where I have screenshots of positive things people have said about me, to me or to others, projects I've worked on, programs that I've done, like keeping track of all that stuff as well, no matter how old you are, like is so important because you will definitely be able to leverage that at some point, whether it's for promotion in a title, promotion in salary. But it's definitely something I leverage. I need to do better at like updating it often, but it's something that I think tech or not, like it's going to help you get into a new industry if you want, because you can just then look at it and apply it to whatever the new role or career is.
Maybe you had a lot of acronyms of who knows what in the world was going on. Yeah. I was like, what is she saying? No. Which is fine. I'll look them up. But for our audience, if you're interested in tech and you don't know what it means, go look it up. Go look up the tech word.
Or write me on LinkedIn. Like, and that's the crazy thing. Like sales, I think Twilio, this last company I was at, was the worst, that they even had to make like a dictionary of all the acronyms they had, like TLDR, too long, didn't read. Like, okay, well then why was it sent out at all? Like, why is that even an acronym we have to come up with? Like, there's just, that's why too, if you follow anyone on social media that like makes fun of salespeople, it's pretty accurate.
It's pretty accurate. Yeah. Bueno, como dice mi mamá, sepa lo que está diciendo. Pero look, I have a question then, and I don't know if you truly answered it or if I kind of like, I was like, did I pay attention when I asked you about your consulting? What is it exactly that you do in your consulting?
Well, yeah. So my consulting business, I would say two focuses. So one, from my 8 years in sales, the last about four has been focused on taking a US product company and so on and soft landing in Latin America. And so my focus for my consulting is helping post-seed startups in the US or Latin America come up with strong go-to-market strategies and implement them. So not just develop them, but implement them so that they can be effective. And then the other, I'd say, sphere or other not thema I would focus on would be supporting startups in identifying which internal technology they should be using to enhance and improve their sales and their customer communications.
Okay. I think I understood that a little bit. I definitely did understand that. But
Yeah.
now this is just on a personal level, so maybe I'll get back to you like on a whole other like conversation about all of that.
Yeah.
What are some practical sales tips that you can give our audience entrepreneurs? As you know, one of our biggest pillars on here is entrepreneurship. We have a whole full day conference dedicated to it. So what is a sales tactic or sales tips or sales for entrepreneurs to be able to what would you recommend? What would you say?
Yeah, so I would say if you're an entrepreneur or you are dabbling with the idea of being an entrepreneur, like just go for it. And again, right, easier said than done, but there are so many tools out there like GoDaddy. They were actually pretty easy just to like buy a website and marketing like package per se, and then building my website. So was able to do it with just that platform. They gave me an email domain, a domain. So like that's where everything for Constante is pretty much made. There's so many tools out there that you can use to help get someone to create your logo, because I am not creative. Like I'm a people person and a salesperson, but I am not an artist. So plenty of tools there as well that you can just literally Google like logo making. And I can always share all these tools with you afterwards if you want to post the episode with them. So just going for it is like the first thing. Having an outline, like what I want to do, what's my vision, but then just going for it. Because I think personally, and I think it might be a female thing, I don't know if it's necessarily a Latina thing, but like we overthink a lot, right? And you kind of said it right too, always thinking about the next problem. It's like, if we don't focus on the now and just do the now, we're never going to get there, because there's always going to be something else for someone else that we will put in front of ourselves. So go for it. And like, for example, I have my website and I posted on LinkedIn, like I started my own firm, and like got so many cheerleaders, zero prospects. And that was scary. I was like, oh damn, like maybe like I did it wrong, but I was like, I don't fucking care. I did it. Like I have a website, like that's cool. And that's empowering. And like, where do I go from here? And then I think this would be a better sales tip, is that once you have like your company like registered, which is really easy to do online as well, and like promoting, like just like, what is it called? Like yell it to the heavens. I don't know, there's some saying that says just like tell everyone, post it on LinkedIn, post on your social media, allow people to schedule a call with you through a Calendly, which is like a booking tool that you can use. Like just let people talk to you and just have conversations and be open to learn. I think LinkedIn is becoming more social media-ish, but it's such a powerful tool to use to build your network, to find prospects, to find people you want to learn from. And there's no shame in asking someone that you want to like speak to for a call. Like I'm all about that. So I'd say that's another tip. Never send blank. Unless you really know the person, don't ever send empty LinkedIn connection requests. Like that's something I think that's everyone should do. And like just remind you, like, hey, for example, like I'll send you a request, say, hey, thanks so much for having me on the podcast. Like really enjoyed our conversation. Just like something minimal, which makes you so much more human. And I think that's a really important tip. And be your genuine, authentic self. I tried hiding that for a long time. And then once I realized, like, if I just embrace who I am and show up as myself, who I love wearing red lipstick. Not everybody feels comfortable with it. I wear hoops, even though I grew up in Wisconsin. Like I'm just so unique myself. And once I finally was myself at work, I felt like I could connect more with people. People feel just more comfortable with you. And I think that's something that we all might be a little timid about, but we need to just feel more comfortable doing, like embracing our true selves.
Okay. I have them, right? I set them up on Calendly. I have them. Right. It's me and somebody else that potentially is going to get this lead, is going to get this business. What is the best practice to put my best foot forward? What would you say?
Yeah.
What is that moment that is, I don't know if it's unique. I don't know if it's different. I don't know what it is but on your side, right? Because you're a people person. How is it that you network into that to be able to get that lead, to be able to get that sell?
Yeah. So preparation is huge. I'm a big person of like, if you set up a call for someone, let's say tomorrow. And so in my position, I'd say, okay, I have a call with someone tomorrow who works at a startup who might be a potential prospect. Like, I need to research them. I need to research their company, and I need to come up with at least 5 to 10 questions. They might not all get answered, but they need to be a really strong intellectual list of questions that their responses will highlight why they need someone like myself, right? Like, okay, congratulations on your current seed round. Do you plan on using any of that for any go-to-market strategizing? Now that question was like a yes or no question. You want to work on more open-ended, but it's like just being prepared. And then during the call, you might have your 10 questions, but embracing the fact that it's just a conversation and you might only get to 2 of them, right? And so being open to listening and being curious. There's a episode of Ted Lasso where he plays darts against his Rebecca, who owns a soccer club. I don't know if you've seen Ted Lasso, but it's on Apple TV. Super great show. He's playing darts and he gives a conversation about how, like, if just be curious and not judgmental. And I think that mentality applies to life just as much as it does to business, entrepreneurship. The more you're curious and genuinely want to get to know a person and their business, the more you're going to be able to uncover around their needs, their areas of like improvement that you can help with, and so on. And so I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind for the conversation too. Like, oh, I just want all these answers. Like, no, you want them, but the most important thing is getting to know the person. And then afterwards, in my case, making sure you send a like really strong thank you email and a summary of what was discussed. And if it's still not clear exactly where you can add value from like a consulting standpoint, say, hey, before I send you a proposal, I really want to better understand a few of these problems. Can we have another call? And that way you're showing that you're really invested in getting to know their true needs and not just trying to like make a sale.
Yeah, there's a saying that especially Juan uses it a lot. It's called we say people like doing business with people they like.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that they don't like you. It's just to say that they're comfortable around you. It's just another way of saying, people buy from the brand because they like the brand and they think the people behind running the brand are pretty good people. Yeah, it's an excellent product and so on and so forth. But everybody started somewhere. So beyond, then it becomes word of mouth, then it's just brand focused, and it's just product focused, and it's just service focused. But you start somewhere, right? So doing business with people you like, the intellectual side is, yes, very amazing. But if you're difficult to work with and I can't get the things that I need because you're unorganized, you could be the best creative person in the world. But I will keep looking, because if I cannot do business with you and you're making it difficult, I have to take my business somewhere else.
Yes. No, it's so true. I think that's something I feel more comfortable with now after working with Latin America more as like a born and raised American, is that there's a balance between being like firm, organized, to the point, but also ensuring like you're putting people and their needs first. Like, hey, how was your day? Like, how are things going? And then like getting into the business aspect, like it's really interesting, but it's important to have that balance, because people want to talk to people, like real humans. And if you are always worried about selling, or always worried about like making the next dollar, like people can sense it and people know that. And so it's just being a good person.
When you get to know somebody and somebody that you're working with, especially, when when you're getting to know them, there's comes a time and a moment where you can already anticipate what their questions are going to be, so you prepare for them, or you can already know what it is that they're expecting out of you. So a lot of the times, and it's just that keeping that conversation going of like, what is it that they have preferences as to how they like to work. They have preferences as how the business. So there's a small divide, right? So you're working for a big corporation, Fortune 500, whatever, right? They have their own expectancies, but then you have the person who's dealing in that department has their own expectancies. You have to be able to merge them together to be able to work for the company and work for the person that hired you for that company as a consultant, as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, and so forth. But we can go on. I love talking about business. I love talking about entrepreneurship. That's my wheelhouse, and I love it. I love it. Okay, bueno. Before I do let you go, one of the last questions that I ask every Latina is, do you consider yourself a leader?
I do. I think it took me a long time to accept that and embrace it. But I think when I've got my first like message from someone speaking highly of me as a leader and not a manager, and that's the thing. I think, people are like, oh, I have a boss or I have a manager, but someone's like, Melissa was a really good leader. I'm like, okay, so you saw me more as just the person you report to or have to like show up for a one-on-one with. And I think I realized like leadership, there's an illustration somewhere, right, where like a manager just like points and everyone follows, whereas in a leader's like actually walking with them. And I embrace that because I think there is no better way to build trust with people than to do things alongside them. And it's, in this case, it's sales and making sure I'm showing up on sales calls where they need me and cold calling or cold emailing on their behalf. Like just being a part of the team is being a leader. And yeah, seeing people grow on my team, get promoted, them saying positive things about me in a public forum. I'm like, okay, like I've made an impact and I don't want it to be over. And that's something I've struggled with now that I'm laid off and I'm considering like going back full time into the corporate world. Is I was just recently a regional sales director. That was my title. I think titles are also like an interesting thing in the corporate world.
They are.
Do I want that again, or do I want to be an account executive? And if I'm an account executive, like, does that take away like everything I've quote unquote achieved? And, I've realized it doesn't. Like, I'm still me. I'm still the person who's had the last 8 years of experience, 3.5, which have been in leadership. And I can still be a leader as an account executive. Like, it's not just about being an AE on a team, but I can find an ERG and want to help lead it. I can keep my own podcast going and like empower people there and be a leader. And so I think that's something I've also learned is that you don't have to have the professional title of like manager to be a leader. Like you can do that in other ways. And if you can, like you should, especially as a Latina, because it's hard to find. And I've really tried to find it, especially in the corporate tech world. And I think it's getting better, but I'm hoping like there can be some drastic changes soon because we need more Latinas in tech for sure.
Yeah. Here's the call out. Latinas who are in tech, let us know you're there.
Latinas in tech, unite, right?
Yeah. So where can we find you? If I'm watching this and I'm like, you know what, I want to follow Mel because she has a lot of great information. Where can we find you? And please say your podcast name.
So there's Professional Melissa and Personal Melissa. Personal Melissa is very vocal on her thoughts and stances on all of the things. So let's keep it a Professional Melissa now. So LinkedIn. So Melissa Toledo on LinkedIn. I have, like I mentioned, like a super casual, nonchalant podcast called Mama Melly the Manager. Because a lot of people look at me as a mama bear in work, and so spiffed off that. LinkedIn that. My consulting webpage, constante.consulting. I think those would be the 3 places to start with. The podcast is on Apple and Spotify. It does not compare to this at all. Super casual. But again, that's where those are probably the best 3 places to find me.
Well, let's try it. I know this one's a little bit different because this does come off very much more like a kind of business like, conversations. But I do have another series actually on this platform called Las Patronas, where it's casual, where we talk about things that, not that like they're controversial. They can be controversial. We want to make them controversial, but we do have a different side of the Latina Leadership Podcast. It's called Las Patronas. So maybe we can bring you back on for that one. That's a whole other audience. That's if you want to join us there. That's kind of like this is after you put your kids to bed type of situation.
Yeah, I'd be down. Like I said, I've learned to just be my authentic self, which can be really, really like blunt to the point, like strict. However, like when I can speak freely about what I'm passionate about, what I love, like, yeah, it just feels so much better, so free. And I truly, truly, truly want to help empower others. So yeah, anything I can do, hit me up on LinkedIn, anything, like I'm here for it, especially now that I'm semi-jobless. Like, hey, I'm here to do the most that I can during my free time when I'm not thinking about what to make for dinner, what the kids need to do this week, all that stuff.
Picking them up. Okay. Bueno, Melissa, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. I greatly, greatly, greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so much again. I can't even say thank you enough. This was so great, and I hope it helped at least one person too who's listening.
No, I'm sure it'll help several. This goes beyond Latinas in tech. I know there's a big spin to want to get more Latinas in tech, so this is going to go more than just one person for sure.
Yeah, very grateful. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you for joining us.
What did you think of the conversation? If you enjoyed what you heard, let us know in the comments. And please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Thank you for listening to the Latina Leadership Podcast, and we will see you next time.